Town forced to bulldoze new development after building on land they didn't own. Hi Reddit, I've got one gem of a story that my grandfather told me about his hometown after he came home from World War II. It has to do with a tree farmer, a corrupt mayor, and over 20 homes getting bulldozed. Enjoy. At the end of World War II, thousands of troops were heading home, starting new families, and wanting to move out of the city. There was a major housing boom all around the country. People couldn't move out of the cities fast enough, and developers could not build homes fast enough either. There was tons of money to be made in the construction business, which led to some, quote, underhanded business practices. One such practice started construction before the land acquisition was actually finalized. Enter my grandfather. Let's call him G. After serving as a pilot during the war, he came home to a very different town. When G went off to fight in 1942, the town was what he would describe as, quote, tired and worn down. But to his amazement, the town he saw stepping off the train in 1948 was anything but. Newly paved roads, a traffic light, and new homes. New homes that just went on and on. He actually got lost on his way back to the family farm due to the new main town road being rerouted while he was away. But what took him by surprise the most was a new development being built on his childhood friend, let's call him John's, tree farm. This was very surprising to him, mainly because he knew how much the farm meant to John and his family. The farm went back at least 2 generations, but my G just guessed that the developer had made John's family an offer that was too good to refuse. However, the thought was shot down later that evening during his welcome home dinner back home. It was my great-grandmother that tipped him off that something was off. He couldn't recall exactly what she had said, but it was something along the lines of, "Oh, I just wish John was still alive to be here." My G nearly choked, not because of the news, but because John was not dead. He was still in Hawaii. My G had gotten a postcard from him not but 4 days ago. Turns out while John was off in the Navy fighting in the Pacific Theater for our country, John's dad had suffered a stroke and passed away, and his mother passed away less than a week from, quote, a broken heart. More than likely, John was never informed of their passing, and now the 20 plus homes that were being built on their land. My G about ran out of the house, jumped in his father's Model T, and raced into town to send one bombshell of a telegram to John in Hawaii. John, your folks passed. Farm now being built on. Come quick. G. My G never got a response back. He figured that John must have fainted from shock, then jumped up and ran to the Navy base to get the first boat home, because he was back in less than 4 days, and he was mad. According to my G, when he burst through the doors of the mayor's office, everyone in the room looked like they were about to drop dead. The poor desk clerk was fumbling over his words, trying to talk to John. When the mayor came out of his office to see what all the commotion was about, as soon as he saw John, he went white as a sheet and then ran back into his office and locked the door. Getting nowhere at the mayor's office, John went to the next town over and hired a lawyer. What followed was a 7-year court case that ended in the mayor being sentenced to 8 years in jail and the developer going bankrupt. Turns out after John's parents passed away, John wasn't able to be contacted for some reason, and then they just assumed he was dead. So when an out-of-state developer wanted to build homes in the area, the mayor just permitted them to start building on John's farm for a quite hefty kickback, of course. Also, because John's lawsuit, the developer couldn't finish the pre-sold homes, which ended up in more lawsuits. In the end, the mayor, the developer, and the town ended up having to pay John close to $45,000 in total. Today, that'd be worth over $752,000, and then they had to return the farm to its prior condition. To say John was happy would be a vast understatement. Today, John's tree farm is a nature reserve, and the story of the corrupt mayor is all but forgotten except by a few locals. John passed away in 1999. My G has been back to his hometown a few times to visit his grave and to check on the old tree farm. This man fought for our country in World War II, and you're just gonna pretend like he's dead and just build a bunch of homes on his land? Oh my goodness, that's the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard. I'm so glad he came back, even though it took how many years? 7 years to get his land back and get his money, but at least he got his money, at least he got his land back. And also that mayor, I really hope that mayor rots in prison. I can't believe you do that to somebody who's serving our country and whose parents had just died. Like, Jesus, that is so bad.
Neighbors kept parking in our parking lot, so I froze them out. This happened around 20 years ago. Our family owned 2 apartment buildings, 3 units each. We lived in 2 of them and rented out the other 4. There's nothing but these 3 flats lining both sides of the road for about a mile. Not all of them have parking. On the side streets are houses and they have very little street parking. We had more land than most of these units since it was also our home, so we had parking for about 16 cars. Everything was going fine for literally decades. Then, cars started appearing in our parking lot that were not our tenants. I blocked one in one day and went outside to see that this a-hole drove through our bushes and across the yard to get out. I called the cops, but there's nothing that they could do, so I called a tow company and had them put up signs. We'd have to call them to get a car towed, but the signs seemed to work. No more random cars. Until New Year's Eve one year. I arrive home and every space is filled. There are even cars on the street blocking in other cars. I'm beyond pissed. I called the tow company and they can't do anything for a few hours because they're so busy. We're in the Chicago suburbs and it's below 0 out, so I have an idea. I dug out all of the lawn sprinklers and hoses. I run one of the hoses inside to the laundry room faucet and turn on the hot water. This way, the hose and the sprinklers won't ice up. But the cars on the ground sure did. 3 sprinklers moved every half hour or so for almost 5 hours. Every car, every square inch of the parking lot, and the streets by the cars encased completely in ice. I made it a point to spray ice in the locks, in between the window seals and glass, and even in the grills. I put away the sprinklers and the hoses and then went to bed. Around 4 a.m., furious pounding on all of the doors. The doorbells were ringing non-stop. We just smiled and called the cops. We waited until they arrived and went outside. The cops were holding back laughter. These people were told to park by their friend who owned an apartment several buildings away. This friend is the same idiot who drove over our bushes. I pointed to the tow sign and told the people to move their cars or get towed. In our town, cops can ticket on private property with the owner's permission, so all the cars were ticketed. They were also towed since nobody could get in their vehicle. I sure wish we had it on video. OP, I wish you had a video of it too. I can't imagine the look on their faces when they saw that all of their cars were encased in a winter wonderland. And they got tickets on top of it. This was the perfect way to get your revenge back. And it's a warning to anyone who decides to park on private property. Let this be a lesson to you. Try to steal my illegally rented parking spot. Enjoy being unemployed. This happened last night, and I'm now in a good enough spot to actually post this. I'm not quite sure if it qualifies as pro, but it definitely isn't petty. I'm a professional driver. As such, on the road in the United States, there's different truck stops throughout the country that have a pay-to-park system. This usually entails about 10 to 20% of the parking lot marked off as reserved, with each space running around $15 to $25. The truck stop where this took place had a parking of $17, which is relatively cheap for a guaranteed spot. The spots are reserved for 24 hours, starting at 4 p.m. local time and extending to 3 p.m. the following afternoon. I knew that I would have a late night delivery, so I came to the truck stop around 3:30 and paid for a reserved spot. I told the manager on duty that I had a delivery up the road that night and we'd be back once the delivery was completed. But I should still be able to clear out the spot by the next afternoon, which is today. She told me that this was okay and that she would mark the spot as sold whenever I left. That way, if someone else comes in trying to reserve that spot, she would consult her notes and deny the sale. 11:15 p.m. rolls around and I take off for my delivery. I don't get out of that facility until 2:30 a.m. the next morning, this morning. So I groggily drive back to the truck stop to reclaim my paid-for spot, only to find that the reserved parking spaces are all full. I call the manager on duty and after giving her my info, inform her that all of the spots are full and that someone has parked in my spot and hasn't paid for it. She sends her other employee to start checking out the trucks. The culprit was from a company that's known for their bright orange trailers and he was the company driver for it. The other employee starts banging on his door to inform him that he's parked illegally, and he has to move. Meanwhile, I can see the commotion from my mirror, with my vantage point from the fuel island, where I had been instructed to temporarily park. The driver answers the door with a bottle of beer in one hand and some sort of smoking implement in the other. I know what it is, but for the sake of the mods, and YouTube, I'm not going to say it. I decided to roll down the window to hear the commotion, and I could hear the employee tell the driver to either move or he'll get the towing company and the police involved. The driver is flat out irate that someone had the audacity to tell him where he can and cannot park. So he slams the door on the employee, threatening him. The employee calls the police and tow company and the police show up first. Now, I had worked for this orange trailer company before, so I know what their policies are, and more importantly, what they can and cannot have in their trucks. Alcoholic beverages are not allowed in the cab. Anything that isn't a cigarette or cigar and a lighter, also not allowed. The coup de grace, a pew-pew. Of any kind, absolutely not allowed, and especially not allowed loaded. This guy had all of that and some other not-so-legal substances in his cab, so he was hauled off away in handcuffs. His truck was hauled off away on a wrecker after that. I made a call after the commotion died down to the company safety director and informed them that their rig would be in an impound lot and that their driver is going to go to jail for some not-so-legal stuff that he had in his truck. She thanked me and said that he will definitely lose his job, especially over the alcohol and the other not-so-legal stuff. I guess he played the screw around and find out card and it bit him in his career. I bet this truck driver was so excited to find someone's unused parking spot without realizing that it would bite them in the butt later. Anyways, OP, I'm glad that you were able to get your parking spot and you were able to bring down this reckless driver.
Don't mess with an engineer. I work for a company that provides specialized equipment used in manufacturing. To protect my anonymity, I'll have to be vague about what exactly this machine does. During my time working in this field, I got to know many clients who needed these machines installed and serviced. One of these customers Let's call him Jake. I later left the company for a different job, but Jake apparently kept my number. One afternoon, I got a call from Jake that they wanted a new unit installed and another unit that needed maintenance and wanted to know if I was available. I let him know that I left the company, but I would pass him on to somebody who could help. He tells me that he'll pay double my current rate just to install it over the weekend. He lets me know that the company has increased the rates for installation and the company just can't afford it. The instructions they send over just aren't clear enough and their engineers are scratching their head trying to figure it out. He begs me to consider it, and I agree. For more context, installing this unit can take a good few hours, or up to a day on your own. The company gives you two options. You can either pay for the engineer to come and install it, or you can save money and they'll send the instructions so the customer's own engineer can install it by themselves. The instructions aren't super easy to follow, and it's company policy that if somebody has started the installation on the equipment, that the supplier wouldn't get involved if they couldn't verify any of the pieces weren't broken. This will be important later. I drive down on the weekend and they show me where the boxes of equipment are. I set to work and make good progress on installing the unit. Around 6 hours in, and I'm stopped by Jake who greets me. I let him know I'm nearly finished, and he tells me, quote, "Sorry, but they just don't have the budget to pay you." He understands my frustration, but his engineers can take it from here. To say I was frustrated was an understatement, and I wanted revenge. There's a small button inside the unit that changes the unit into test mode. This is done to perform maintenance on the unit, but it's impossible to configure the unit with this button pressed. It's only possible to reach this button using a pin, so it's not easily pressed during the installation process. Because of this, the installation instructions don't mention it. There's no real way of telling the equipment is in test mode, it just won't work normally. I think you can guess where this is going. I clicked the button, I collected my things, and I left. Monday morning, I get a call from Jake. I declined. I knew my old company wouldn't get involved since I already started installing the unit, and I knew his engineers would never figure it out. So I just let him stew. A few days later, with many missed calls, I finally pick up. Jake is furious. He asks me where the heck I've been and why haven't I been picking up the phone. He tells me he can't figure out how to configure the machine and they need my help. I tell him, "Why is this my problem? You won't pay me." He told me he was sorry and that they would work something out as soon as possible. I told him, "No, you're gonna pay me $7,000 up front before I do anything." I've never felt this powerful before. He screamed at me for a bit, and then he hung up. He called back a day later saying he was sorry for how he acted, and he said that if I would come and fix it, he'd actually pay me, in a totally defeated tone. He tried to fight it, saying that he'll pay me when I was done, but I was having none of it. A bit of back and forth, and he agrees to pay me. The money hit my account, and I came in the next day. The look of confusion over his face when I took a pin out and changed the unit from test mode was priceless. It was even more priceless with seeing his reaction of me packing up my tools and leaving only after 20 minutes of configuring. Easiest $7,000 I've ever made. Don't try and mess with a professional problem solver. If you've gotten this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you really enjoy our content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.